still remember the exact moment I caught her. My Aunt Diane's hands trembled as the appraiser confirmed what I'd suspected for months. "These aren't the original diamonds, ma'am. They're cubic zirconia, maybe worth $200 total." How far would she go to hide what she had done to my grandmother? "My name is Victoria Hayes. I'm 32 and live in Charleston, South Carolina, where my family has deep roots stretching back generations. Growing up, my grandmother Elaine was my rock. My parents divorced when I was 7, and with my dad mostly absent and my mom working double shifts as a nurse, I spent countless weekends at Grandma's historic Victorian home in the old part of town. Before I keep going, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Also, hit the like button if you want more true family betrayal stories. Grandma's house was my sanctuary. While other kids played video games, I learned to bake her secret recipe apple pie and listened to stories about her youth. She'd often let me try on pieces from her jewelry collection, handed down through generations of women in our family. Nothing fancy by celebrity standards, but each piece had history. An antique sapphire ring from her mother, diamond earrings from her grandmother, and a pearl necklace her husband gave her on their 25th anniversary. "Someday these will be yours, Victoria," she'd say, clasping a necklace around my neck while I admired it in her vanity mirror. "Every woman in our family adds one special piece to pass down." I'd nod solemnly, understanding even as a child that these weren't shiny objects but physical connections to our past. My grandmother was diagnosed with congestive heart failure when I was 29. The next 3 years were a slow decline, with brief rallies that gave us false hope, followed by hospitalizations that stole more of her strength each time. I visited as often as possible, sometimes sitting beside her bed, reading while she slept. My Aunt Diane, my mother's older sister, lived 2 hours away in Colombia and had a strained relationship with Grandma. They argued constantly about everything from politics to proper pie crust. But when Grandma got sick, Diane suddenly became the devoted daughter, swooping in every other weekend with casseroles and concern. "It's nice to see you two getting along," I said once, after Diane had fluffed Grandma's pillows and brought fresh flowers. "People change when they realize time is short," Diane replied, not meeting my eyes. Grandma died on a Tuesday morning in early spring. The cherry blossoms she loved were beginning to bloom. I was at work when Mom called. I remember sinking to the floor of my classroom. I teach 3rd grade, and my assistant rushing the children to music early. The funeral was beautiful, with old hymns and stories that made us laugh through tears. A week after the funeral, we gathered at Grandma's house. Her attorney, Mr. Patterson, a thin man with gentle eyes who had handled our family's legal matters for decades, read the will. Most of it was straightforward: the house to my mother, some investments split between Mom and Diane, and specific items to various family members and friends. Then came the part I had been expecting. "And to my beloved granddaughter, Victoria, I leave my entire collection of jewelry, cataloged in the attached document." I felt a momentary comfort, not because of any monetary value, but because I'd have those tangible pieces of her to keep close. "Actually," Diane interrupted, clearing her throat, "there has been a change to that." Mr. Patterson looked confused. "I'm not aware of any codicil regarding the jewelry." Diane pulled out a handwritten note. "Mom gave me this 2 weeks before she passed away. She wanted me to have the jewelry collection. Victoria can have the costume pieces, of course." I felt like I had been slapped. The room went silent as Mr. Patterson examined the note with a frown. "This appears to be your mother's handwriting," he said slowly, "but it's not signed or notarized. Legally, the will takes precedence." "She was clear about her wishes," Diane insisted, her voice rising. "She specifically told me Victoria wouldn't appreciate the historical value. I'm the oldest daughter." My mother, always the peacemaker, touched my arm. "Vicky, maybe we should." "No," I said, surprised by my own firmness. "Grandma told me for years those pieces would come to me. She never mentioned changing her mind." The argument escalated until Mr. Patterson suggested a cooling-off period. "Let's revisit this in a week," he said. "Meanwhile, I'll inventory the jewelry as specified in the will." But when we went to Grandma's bedroom to check the jewelry box in her closet safe, another shock awaited. The box was there, but half the pieces listed in the will's attachment were missing. "Where are the pearl earrings? The emerald brooch?" I asked, looking through the velvet-lined compartments. Diane shrugged. "Mom sold some pieces in her final years. Medical bills, you know." "Without telling anyone," my mother frowned. "That doesn't sound like her." "She didn't want to worry you," Diane said. "I helped her with the transactions." Something felt wrong, but grief clouded my judgment. I was too emotionally exhausted to fight. When Diane suggested we split the remaining pieces to avoid further conflict, I reluctantly agreed, taking the few items I remembered most from childhood. It wasn't until 3 months later that the first real clue emerged. I was wearing Grandma's ruby pendant at a charity gala when I bumped into Margaret Simmons, my grandmother's closest friend. "Victoria, how lovely to see Elaine's necklace again," she said, touching the pendant. "Though wasn't the stone larger? My eyes must be failing me." Her innocent comment awakened my suspicions. That night, I examined the pendant carefully under bright light. The setting looked slightly different from my memories. The gold seemed less worn, and the stone's color was too uniform. I took it to a jeweler the next day, asking for a cleaning. The older man studied it through his loupe and frowned. "This isn't an antique piece, miss. It's maybe 10 years old at most, and the stone is lab-created." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. This belonged to my grandmother. It's been in our family for generations." He shook his head sympathetically. "I'm sorry, but whoever told you that wasn't being truthful." I left in a daze, my mind racing. If this piece was fake, what about the others? And where were the originals? That weekend, I visited my mother, casually asking if she had kept the key to Grandma's safe deposit box. "I think so," she said, digging through her desk drawer. "Though Diane mentioned she'd cleared it out months ago." Another piece of the puzzle. Did you go with her? No, she handled it. She said there were some old documents. I borrowed the key without explaining why. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and visited Grandma's bank. The manager remembered me, and after verifying my identity as a co-signer on the account, led me to the vault. The box wasn't empty. Inside lay a small leather pouch that made my heart race as I untied its drawstring. Out poured Grandma's real jewelry, the pieces I remembered, including items Diane had claimed were sold. I recognized the weight of genuine gold, the fire of real diamonds, and the luster of authentic pearls. My hands shook as I realized what this meant. Diane hadn't tried to steal my inheritance. She'd systematically replaced valuable pieces with fakes, probably keeping or selling the originals while Grandma was still alive. I carefully photographed everything, then returned the pouch to the box. Walking out, I felt different, anger replacing grief, determination replacing confusion. Back home, I started investigating in earnest. I requested copies of Grandma's bank statements for the past 5 years, which took some convincing, but was possible as I had been added as a financial proxy during her illness. When the records arrived, my blood ran cold. Regular withdrawals, starting small but increasing in frequency and amount as her health declined. 5,000 here, 8,000 there. In her final year alone, nearly $80,000 had vanished from her accounts. The withdrawal slips all bore Grandma's signature, or what appeared to be her signature. I remembered Grandma complaining once that her checkbook didn't balance, but Diane had quickly attributed it to senior moments and offered to manage her finances. We'd all been grateful for the help. Next, I visited Grandma's house, still unsold, using the key Mom had given me. I needed to search for more evidence before confronting Diane. In Grandma's study, I methodically went through every drawer and folder. In the back of her Bible, I found it, a sheet of paper with repeated attempts at copying Grandma's distinctive signature. The earlier attempts were clearly Diane's handwriting, gradually morphing into a reasonable facsimile of our grandmother's. My aunt had been practicing forgery. I sat on the floor of Grandma's study, surrounded by evidence of betrayal, and wept for the first time since the funeral. Not for the theft, but for the calculated deception. How many times had Grandma been confused about her missing money or jewelry, only to have Diane convince her she was becoming forgetful? That evening, I called my cousin Bethany, Diane's daughter, who lived in Atlanta. We weren't close. Diane had always kept us somewhat separated, but I needed information. "Hey, Bate, random question. Did your mom come into money recently? She mentioned something about investments paying off when I saw her last." Bate laughed. "Oh yeah, she's been on a spending spree. New car, kitchen renovation, that trip to Italy. Said some tech stock she bought years ago finally paid off big. Why?" "Just curious," I said. "Good for her." Another piece of the puzzle. Diane's teacher's pension couldn't explain such luxuries. The money had to have come from somewhere. I needed professional help. Using my savings, I hired a forensic accountant named Rachel Winters, who specialized in elder financial abuse. She reviewed the documents I had gathered and confirmed my suspicions. "These signatures were definitely forged," Rachel said, pointing to subtle inconsistencies. "And these withdrawals follow a classic pattern of escalation. Start small to test the waters, then increase as confidence grows." "Is it enough to go to the police?" I asked. She hesitated. "Possibly, but these cases can be difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, especially when family is involved. Banks often settle quietly. Do you have any other evidence?" I thought of the fake jewelry. Maybe, but I need to gather more. That weekend, I visited Mr. Patterson, Grandma's attorney. Initially reluctant to discuss the case, his demeanor changed when I showed him my findings. "I had concerns," he admitted, removing his glasses. "Your grandmother made an appointment to see me 3 weeks before she passed. She mentioned irregularities in her accounts, but she wasn't specific. We scheduled a follow-up to review her finances, but she was hospitalized before we could meet. Diane called to cancel, saying Elaine was confused by the medication." "Did you believe that?" I asked. He sighed. "I've known your family for 30 years, Victoria. I didn't want to believe that a daughter would steal from her dying mother." As I left his office, he called after me, "Whatever you're planning, be careful. Diane won't go down without a fight." He was right. I needed to be smart, gather irrefutable evidence, and choose the right moment. This wasn't about jewelry or money anymore. It was about justice for Grandma and exposing the truth to our entire family. The next breakthrough came unexpectedly. While helping Mom clean out some of Grandma's belongings, I found a small digital voice recorder in her bedside table. Grandma had used it to record grocery lists and reminders as her handwriting deteriorated. Out of curiosity, I plugged it into my laptop. Most files were mundane: shopping lists, medication reminders, birthday gift ideas. But one recording from 2 months before she died made me freeze. "Diane took my tennis bracelet today," Grandma's weak voice said. "Claims she's getting it cleaned, but I saw her eyeing it last week. That's the 3rd piece this month. Something's not right. Victoria would notice, but she's busy with school. Should I say something? Diane gets so defensive, makes me feel foolish. Maybe I am forgetful now." The recording ended. I played it again, tears streaming down my face. Grandma had known something was wrong, but had been manipulated into doubting herself, a classic tactic used against the elderly. I found more recordings, each more heartbreaking than the last. Grandma documented her suspicions, but also her self-doubt, her fear of confrontation, her worry about dividing the family. In the final recording, weeks before her death, she sounded resolute. "I've asked to see James Patterson next week. This isn't right. I'm not imagining things. The bank statement Diane showed me was different from the one that came in the mail. I kept the original under my mattress. Victoria will know what to do." But she never made it to that appointment, and I never knew she'd been reaching out for help. I made copies of everything and secured the originals in my own safety deposit box. Then I reached out to the one person who might have more insight: Marion Kelly, Grandma's home health aide during her final months. Marion initially hesitated when I called, but she agreed to meet at a coffee shop. Her dark eyes were wary as she stirred her latte. "I've been hoping someone would ask," she finally said. "Your aunt made it clear that my job depended on keeping quiet, but what she did wasn't right." Marion described how Diane would search through Grandma's things when she thought no one was watching. How she'd intercept mail, especially bank statements. How she'd take jewelry to be cleaned, but return with what Marion suspected were replicas. Once, your grandmother confronted her about a missing ring. Your aunt convinced her she'd dreamed of owning it, even though I'd seen it myself the week before. It made your grandmother cry, questioning her own mind. I clenched my fists under the table. "Why didn't you say something?" Marion looked down. "I needed the job, single mother, 2 kids, and your aunt threatened to claim I was stealing if I spoke up. Who would believe me over a respectable family member? I'm sorry, Victoria, I really am." I couldn't blame her. Diane had manipulated everyone with her position in the family and her role as Grandma's caretaker. "Will you make a statement if needed?" I asked. Marion nodded. "It's time. Your grandmother was kind to me." Armed with mounting evidence, I consulted a lawyer specializing in elder abuse cases. Catherine Winters reviewed everything and outlined my options. "You have a solid case for both civil litigation and potential criminal charges," she explained. "But family cases are complicated. Are you prepared for what this will do to your family relationships?" "The relationship was destroyed the moment she began stealing from my grandmother," I said firmly. Catherine nodded. "Then we proceed carefully, document everything, don't confront her yet." Over the next month, I built my case meticulously. I tracked down the jeweler who had appraised several pieces Diane had sold. He remembered her well and had records of the transactions. I found the bank teller who had processed many of the withdrawals, who admitted she had concerns, but that Diane had always had the signed withdrawal slips. Then came the breakthrough I hadn't anticipated. While having dinner with my mother, she mentioned casually that Diane had recommended a contractor for some home repairs. He did such beautiful work on her kitchen renovation. Apparently, she paid him in cash, said she got a huge discount that way. Cash transactions. Of course. I asked Mom for the contractor's name and called him the next day, posing as Diane's assistant. "Mrs. Harmon asked me to confirm how she paid for the recent renovation," I said smoothly. "Our records are a bit confusing." "Oh, yeah," he said easily. "Paid all $45,000 in cash. Never seen that much money at once. It made my job a lot easier tax-wise, if you know what I mean." I thanked him and hung up. Money laundering, another potential charge. The pieces were falling into place. But the final, devastating twist came from an unexpected source. My Uncle Robert, Diane's ex-husband, called me out of the blue. "Victoria, I heard you've been asking questions about your grandmother's estate," he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "There's something you should know." We met at a quiet bar downtown. Robert looked older than I remembered. His one-stark hair was now completely silver. "Diane and I divorced 10 years ago because I discovered she'd been embezzling from the dental practice where she worked as office manager," he said, staring into his whiskey. "Nearly $200,000 over 5 years. The dentist was a friend who agreed not to press charges if she repaid everything." I sat back stunned. I never knew. Few people did. We kept it quiet, family reputation and all that. I covered most of the repayment in our divorce settlement, thinking it was a one-time mistake. But afterward, I heard rumors about other incidents. A church treasury shortage when she was the secretary, missing funds from a school fundraiser. "A pattern," I whispered. Robert nodded. "She has a problem, Victoria, maybe a pathology. When I heard your grandmother had made her a signatory on her accounts, I tried to warn your mother. But Diane had already convinced everyone I was bitter about the divorce." This revelation changed everything. This wasn't opportunistic theft from an elderly relative. It was part of a lifelong pattern of financial exploitation. "Why tell me now?" I asked. "Because she called asking to borrow money. She said she's in some financial trouble. That struck me as odd given the inheritance she received." He paused. "She's burning through cash. Whatever you're planning, do it soon." That night, I couldn't sleep. Diane's financial desperation meant she might be planning to sell more of Grandma's real jewelry or liquidate other assets before anyone discovered the truth. I needed to act. The next morning, I called an emergency family meeting at my mother's house, claiming I had important information about Grandma's estate. I invited everyone. My mother, Aunt Diane, Cousin Bethany, who flew in from Atlanta, and even Uncle Robert, despite Diane's objections. I also invited Mr. Patterson and Catherine Winters, my attorney, without explaining their presence to the others. And I arranged for a jeweler specializing in antique pieces to be available on call. When everyone had arrived and settled in my mother's living room, I began carefully. Thank you all for coming. I've discovered some information about Grandma's estate that affects everyone. I kept my voice steady, despite the rapid beating of my heart. Diane immediately looked suspicious. What is this about, Victoria? Some of us have actual jobs to get back to. I opened my briefcase and removed a folder. I've been investigating discrepancies in Grandma's finances and personal property for the past several months. What discrepancies? Mom asked, frowning. Instead of answering directly, I placed 3 items on the coffee table. The fake ruby pendant, a bank statement showing withdrawals with the forged signature, and Grandma's voice recorder. Aunt Diane, would you mind telling everyone where Grandma's real jewelry is? The pieces you replaced with these fakes. I pushed the pendant toward her. Her face remained composed, but I saw the flash of panic in her eyes. I have no idea what you're talking about. That's the pendant Mom always had. Really? Because I had it appraised. I slid the jeweler's report across the table. It's a replica made within the last decade. The original was from the Victorian era with a natural ruby. Mom picked up the report, her face paling as she read. This is ridiculous, Diane scoffed. You're upset about the will. The will that specified the jewelry collection came to me. The one you tried to override with a forged note, I interrupted. Like you forged Grandma's signature on these bank withdrawals. I played one of Grandma's recordings. Her frail voice filled the room, describing her missing tennis bracelet and Diane's excuses. The color drained from my mother's face as she listened. I don't have to sit here and be accused by my own niece, Diane said, standing abruptly. This is absurd. Sit down, Diane, Uncle Robert said quietly. Let her finish. For the next hour, I methodically presented my evidence. The forged signatures confirmed by a handwriting expert, the bank records showing $127,000 in unauthorized withdrawals over 3 years, the testimony from Marion and the jeweler, and finally, the real jewelry I had discovered in the safety deposit box, pieces Diane had claimed were sold. I saved the most damning evidence for last, calling the jeweler who came to the house with his equipment. One by one, he examined the pieces Diane had kept for herself, confirming each was a high-quality replica, not the antique original. These are sophisticated fakes, he explained. To the untrained eye, they appear genuine, but the metalworking techniques and stone-cutting methods are modern. Throughout my presentation, Diane's demeanor shifted from indignant denial to stunned silence as she realized the extent of my investigation. When I finished, the room was quiet enough to hear the ticking of the mantel clock. My mother broke the silence, her voice trembling. Diane, please tell me this isn't true. Diane's defensive facade cracked. You don't understand. Mom promised me that jewelry years ago, then changed her mind. It wasn't fair. I deserved something after all I did for her. So you admit to taking the originals, I pressed. I replaced them with nice pieces. She never knew the difference. She was dying anyway. The naked admission stunned everyone. Bate began crying quietly. Uncle Robert shook his head in disgust. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. Mrs. Harmon, what you're describing is elder financial abuse and theft. It's a criminal offense. You can't prove anything, Diane snapped, panic rising in her voice. Catherine spoke for the first time. Actually, Ms. Hayes has compiled quite a comprehensive case. The bank records alone show a clear pattern of forgery and unauthorized withdrawals. The jewelry substitution is documented by expert testimony, and your grandmother's own recordings provide compelling evidence of your actions and her awareness of them. What happens now? My mother asked quietly. I took a deep breath. That depends on Aunt Diane. I'm prepared to file both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit to recover Grandma's stolen assets. Or what? Diane asked, her voice small. Or you can make this right. Return everything you took. Reimburse Grandma's estate for every dollar you stole. Sign a legally binding confession of what you did, which will hold an escrow unless you ever attempt anything like this again. You expect me to hand over everything. I've spent most of the cash. Then sell your house. Liquidate your investments. Take out loans. I don't care how you do it, but you will make this right, I said firmly. And you'll do it quickly, or the police get everything I've shown you today. For the first time, Diane seemed to comprehend her situation. Her shoulders sagged as the weight of her actions and their consequences finally settled on her. I need time to think, she whispered. You have 48 hours, Catherine stated. After that, we will proceed with legal action. As the family meeting broke up, my mother pulled me aside, her eyes red from crying. How long have you known? She asked. I've been investigating for months. I want to be certain before I say anything. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I squeezed her hand. Because she's your sister. I needed you to see the evidence yourself, not take my word for it. In the end, Diane chose the path of least public resistance. She sold her house and car, liquidated her investments, and borrowed to repay the $127,000 she'd stolen from Grandma's accounts. She returned most of the original jewelry, though some pieces had already been sold and couldn't be recovered. The family was forever changed. Bate speaks to her mother now. Mom struggles with the betrayal by her only sister, but she has accepted the truth. The wider family learned what happened, and Diane found herself isolated at gatherings. Her reputation was damaged. As for me, I had the jewelry collection appraised and insured. Some pieces I wear regularly, honoring Grandma's memory. Others I keep stored for future generations. The monetary value matters less to me than what they represent, not family history, but a reminder that justice sometimes requires patience and persistence. 6 months after our confrontation, I received a small package. Inside was Grandma's sapphire ring. One of the pieces Diane had claimed was sold beyond recovery. A note accompanied it. I found a way to get it back. I'm sorry, not for taking it, but for making her doubt herself. D. It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I would ever receive from her. Sometimes I wonder if Grandma somehow knew what I would discover. Leaving me the safety deposit box key and the voice recorder might have been her way of making sure the truth came out. I like to think she knew I wouldn't rest until justice was served. The hardest part wasn't building the case or confronting Diane. It was accepting that someone I'd grown up trusting had exploited the woman we both loved. That kind of betrayal changes how you see everyone and everything. Last week, I visited Grandma's grave with fresh flowers. As I stood there, I remembered something she often told me. Character is what you do when no one is watching. Diane failed that test. I hope I passed. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But this wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration. Restoring what was stolen, restoring the truth, restoring my grandmother's dignity and memory. In the process, I discovered a strength I didn't know I had. Grandma once told me that her jewelry wasn't valuable because of its price tag, but because each piece carried stories. Now they carry one more story, about a granddaughter who refused to let deception be her grandmother's final chapter. If this story moved you to stand up for yourself, subscribe and turn on notifications. You never know whose story might help you next. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't in a will. It's the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it hurts.